praying of the catena is both the spiritual and the physical high point of the meeting. It's that point where the Presidium is most fully united with the Spirit of Our Lady, and physically, we are also at our highest point. It's the one point in the meeting where we stand. And so if you look at the meeting as a mountaintop, we come in off the street, and we get down on our knees. And then we rise a little way to the table. And then we rise all the way with the catena. And then we go back down to the table. And then we go down further to our knees. And from our knees, we get up and we go. However scattered we were as we come in, and however many different directions we move into when we leave more fully as one and united than we were when we entered. And recognizing that fundamental dynamic, the meeting begins and ends with us on our knees. And that moment at the end of the meeting, we're on our knees before we leave, we ask for a sharing in the faith of Our Lady, a faith that will allow us to make good use of the works we have been given to do. We leave. And that's the context in which to understand this third point of the standing instruction. Because this is now the point that extends beyond the meeting. Note how the first 2 points live in the meeting, they reach beyond the meeting, but this new point now is exercised outside of the meeting and comes back to the meeting. Third, the performance of a substantial, active legionary work in the spirit of faith and in union with Mary in such a fashion that in those worked for and in one's fellow members, the person of our Lord is once again seen and served by Mary, his mother. That's another one of those marvelous sentences that say about 10 things. And so again, we can't just read it and think we're going to get it. And if we read it quickly, year after year, month after month after month, we'll never get it. It's the kind of sentence that we have to sit and look at piece by piece. And it's important enough that we read it every month. And so again, no, we don't have to go far afield for lessons. The handbook itself is putting in front of us something we need to engage on a monthly basis. You know, it really would be an interesting question, like in a Presidium meeting, after the president reads the standing instruction, just to say, you know, I know it's not confession, but if you really don't understand this, put your hand up. You know, because sometimes a certain honesty that do we really know what it is we're repeating all the time? Because again, that can be matter for further study. That can be matter for further conversation. That can be matter for an allocution. And so here, let's look at this one piece at a time. The performance of a substantial, active, legionary work. Not the performance of a work, not even the performance of a legionary work. Note the adjectives. Substantial and active. And in speaking that way now, there's a weightiness about what we're talking about. And that weightiness begins with the commitment. The basic minimum standard is weekly attendance at the meeting and 2 hours of active work. I want to stress, that is not the maximum, that is the minimum. And to quote Jesus from the scripture, when you've done all the things you're supposed to do, say to yourselves, I am a worthless servant, I've just done what I was supposed to. In other words, I shot for the minimum and I hit it. And again, I put this out here not to criticize anybody, but to just emphasize that the handbook regularly wants to call us beyond a certain minimalism. It wants to animate within us a certain generosity, even a heroism from time to time. This is not to say be reckless with your time. And so note the word substantial. The at least 2 hours, that's a substantial amount of time. We feel that, we know that. But it may be more. It may be more. A substantial work from time to time might require more than that. And from time to time, there needs to be a willingness within us. Not everybody can do more than 2 hours every week. And that's okay. And it doesn't make me a bad legionary that I only do 2 hours a week. The issue is, if from time to time I can do more and I never do more, what's going on? And then the idea, though, is that Legion works are also not supposed to be shallow or trivial. And this can be a bigger struggle for us, that there should be an intrinsic weightiness to what we do. Standing at the church door and handing out information flyers, bluntly put, is not a substantial work. You could be there for 8 hours, and that's a substantial amount of time, but it is not a substantial work. Okay? You know, 2 members taking a pilgrim image to a home and spending an hour praying with the family and another hour in transit back and forth, that's substantial. There's a weightiness about that. And so again, you know, we want to look at it that way. Legion work is not supposed to be busy work. Again, from time to time, simply to do what we need to do. You know, for those who are organizing the Legion of Mary retreat, sooner or later somebody's got to spend 2 hours putting stamps on envelopes and sending the information out. Okay? And that's substantially important, even if it seems a trivial task. So from time to time, there are those smaller things that take our time that we do need to attend to. But ordinarily, the work should have a weightiness about it. It shouldn't be anything that we look at and say, where's the significance of this? And note the insistence, it's legionary work. Now let me be blunt here. There have been a couple ways around the country where presidia have nearly killed themselves around this issue. One of the ways is a presidium is feeling that they're in crisis. We're getting older, we're getting smaller, we need new members. And we're not sure where to begin looking and where to get the members. And what ends up happening is often the case, something like this happens. Oh, she's really good. She's involved in this and she's involved in this. She does so much in the parish, she'd be a good legionary. And so we go and we talk to this person who is so active and so involved and so invested. And we invite them to join them, and then we negotiate and we say, and you can keep doing what you're doing as your Legion work. And we've just killed ourselves. Because nothing changes when that person enters the presidium except they have another meeting to go to. And good luck ever assigning a different work to that person. Because the deal that was given when they came in was, I don't have to do anything different. And then we wonder why we have trouble with work assignments. And then we wonder why we have trouble with people helping us with other things because they're already overcommitted. Part of the evaluation of a new member is, can they take on Legion work? Okay? And so the first duty is to do the work that was assigned at the presidium meeting and not something else. You know? And so I might have been assigned to work with the home visitation program, or I might have been assigned, you know, to do something with my partner, and I didn't do that. I substituted something else that seemed better for me. That might even be substantial. It's not my Legion work. That's a wonderful extra that I can include in my reporting, but I'm accountable to the work I was given to do. So note what is being said here. And you see how easily we can go down the slippery slope of losing this? And, you know, and again, I say this very strongly because I've just seen the effects it's had. And, you know, if that's what some of our Presidia are struggling with now, we don't break things to come out of it. It's just recognizing we don't want to keep repeating the mistake. You know, the worst candidates for membership are people who are already over-invested in other things, unless they're willing to give something up. Secondly, any solid, healthy Presidium doesn't allow all possible works. Okay? But that's another mistake that we make. We look at a list of approved works, and then we almost say, and you could do one of these. Notice that there's no game plan to that. There's no direction to that. And then we have a Presidium of 10 members, all of whom are doing 10 different things, but it doesn't add up constructively. Or worse, we disappear into what the other groups in the parish are doing. 2 of our members are teaching catechism, along with a dozen other parishioners. 2 of our members are bringing Holy Communion to the nursing home, along with a group of 20 other ministers. And so note what we're saying. The Legion of Mary does what everybody else does. And that's not to say what everybody else does is bad. But then somebody says, well, what does the Legion of Mary do? Well, some of us teach catechism. Some of us bring communion to the nursing home. And the person's standing there, and I can do that without belonging to you. So note the difference. And again, I am not saying throw everything out. What I am saying is it can be very helpful when we learn how to identify what are the works that we're doing, and privileging maybe things that nobody else is doing. So the Legion has a chance to make a real contribution as the Legion of Mary, where it is. Think of it this way. I'm a priest, that's pretty obvious, or else I'm just a guy dressed up like a priest. But at any rate, your pastor, a guy like me, but holier, wants to reach his people. But like me, his arm isn't very long. The Legion of Mary was founded to be the extension of Father's reaching arm. To go to those places I can't get to. Think of yourselves, if Mary is outstretching her hand, think of yourselves as the fingers of that hand that longs to touch the world with her goodness. And if you have that image in your mind, note that it is fundamentally reaching and stretching outward. It's not content just to be absorbed into what's going on, because on a list we saw that these are approved works. The issue is, what are our works? A good spiritual director is really helpful in identifying that, and I recognize not all of our Presidia have spiritual directors. That's also one of the important reasons for the Curia meeting, for the council meeting. Because these become places where the officers among themselves in multiple Presidia can kick ideas around, can share suggestions, and can begin identifying things. But if you read the handbook with any minimal degree of attentiveness, one of the things that runs through the handbook on a regular basis, it's not that Frank Duff clubs us over the head with it, but he sneaks it in there as this persistent little nudge, is this push toward somebody somewhere at some time should take a shot at something more heroic. And you know, what he means is not every Presidium is going to do remarkably generous things in an obvious way. It may be more subtle. But the Legion is only healthy if at least someplace somebody's reaching a bit further. Somebody's risking a bit more. Someone's making a move a bit beyond where we've been. Obviously, every Presidium can't do that, but some of them can. You know, and it's an interesting question for us in our parish. You know, why did the Legion make it 100 years? It wasn't because just the system is so rock solid, if we keep repeating it, we'll limp towards surviving. It's because within the system there was a structure that could support that kind of a generous spirit that wanted to take a step out. You know, and sometimes, you know, it's an interesting question of just considering what we might be able to do for our parish. That's never a hasty decision. You know, but it's good matter for the second half of the meeting to talk about once in a while. Where, you know, is there a possibility maybe we look at the works we're doing and say, is there something different? And you might be surprised just among the members what kind of creativity that animates. But note that insistence is substantial and it's active. I have to get up and do something. And it's legion work. It's evangelical, apostolic in nature. It's not merely a work of charity. Although, and again, to clarify that, if the work is substantially evangelical, okay, you can give a guy a cup of coffee too. All right? But the work is not, we're serving coffee and then we'll trick you into a sermon. See the difference? If the work is substantially evangelical, from time to time there may be a necessary component of charity. One of the families we've been visiting is in crisis because the mother is sick and no one can get groceries. Get them groceries, it's okay. Just don't do that every week. You know, on a one-off, a lot of things are possible. But note the context. It's not some random person I just heard about. It's somebody we've been working with. See the difference? And we're not starting with the groceries. And we're not continuing with the groceries. So, again, there are certain things we can do as a one-off within the context of the substantial, apostolic, and evangelical character of the work. That's the value. From time to time, that value requires some adjustments. But we always come back to the value. Make sense? That question comes up a lot. And there are times where Presidia paralyze themselves over, there's a point where we really should be helping somebody, but we feel guilty doing it because legionaries don't do that. Legionaries don't do that as their focus. From time, but you know, we are obligated to follow the demands of the gospel. And so again, within the context of a substantial work that is evangelical, there can be a minor note of something else. That minor note shouldn't be consistent and regular, but it can be there. And the classic example of that is the hostel in Dublin. You can't run a hostel without caring for the physical needs of those who come. And that is a Legion of Mary work.
We have a brother downstairs.
Yeah, right. And so just kind of remember that. Because, you know, I've also seen, unfortunately, really good initiatives cut short by that hesitation. So I am not saying run out and open soup kitchens, okay? But I am saying if when you are working with somebody, there is a brief, legitimate need that you are available to address and nobody else is, then take care of it. Then take care of it. You know, and that's all right. And if that, you know, and that is, and in that moment, that is legitimate Legion work because it supplements what we've been doing. That's the key. That is always the key. Maintain the connection to the apostolic thrust of what we do. It's when we get off of that that we have trouble. All right? And that's also why, like I said, be careful about simply disappearing into the other pastoral initiatives in the parish, which are wonderful, but the reality is we lose the Legion's apostolic thrust into somebody else's. And so on the book, technically those might be Legion works, but in reality where you are, it's actually diminishing the Legion doing those things. And that's what we want to be attentive to, because what we've been given is a treasure and we want to attend to preserving it, not to dissipating it. And you think of it this way. A Legion of Mary Presidium is, on the one hand, and I said this to the spiritual directors the other night, on the one hand, your parish presidium is a parish organization. On the other hand, it's not. Because you belong to the Legion of Mary, which is beyond your parish. And note, for the officers of a presidium, you have a double character. On the one hand, you are the representatives of your presidium to the Curia. And you are also the representatives of the Curia to your presidium. Because presidium officers, for example, aren't appointed by the presidium. They're appointed and approved by the Curia. And the minute one becomes a presidium officer, at the same time you become a member of the Curia. And so note that there's this accountability to the reality of my parish, but there is an equally strong accountability to the rest of the Legion. And it's that double character that makes the Legion so uniquely effective when we recognize it. But what happens sometimes is we lose ourselves in the parish. We want to serve the parish without losing who we are. We can only do that by being good, faithful members of the parish, by being actively involved in cooperation with the pastor. But that connection to the higher council is what helps keep us grounded in who we are too. But now, having said all of that, there's still more in this point number 3. And it's the point that keeps on giving. This is to be done in the spirit of faith and in union with Mary. Note the importance of that kneeling at the end of the meeting, asking for a share in Mary's faith. And so here, point 3, that moment we kneel to say that final prayer, we're asking for exactly what this is talking about. The spirit of faith united with Mary that will allow us to do that work well. And when that happens, in such a fashion, man, what a micromanager Mr. Duff is. And he's even telling us now how we have to do the work. Substantial, active, in faith, united with Mary, and in such a way that, but this is a remarkable statement that is often overlooked. There's something that he sneaks in here that is vitally important. In such a way that in those worked for and in one's fellow members, the person of Christ is once again served by his mother. Note the mental image here. In what you do in the spirit of faith with substantial, active, legionary work, the image is those we are working for are like Christ, and we are like the Blessed Mother serving them. The Blessed Mother serves Christ in the work we do for those whom we serve. Note that image of identification with Mary and that identification of those to whom we go as vehicles of the person and presence of Christ. But it says something else. Not just, the easy part is those whom we serve. The tricky part is those with whom we work. Now think about what that means, working in pairs. Work in pairs in such a way that as you do it, your partner is served by you like Christ is served by Mary. And you are served by your partner in such a way it is like Christ being served by Mary. Note what that says about legionary cooperation. That is an absolutely remarkable statement. Nobody says that. And among ourselves, we talk about going out in prayers for all kinds of practical reasons or symbolically. Well, Jesus sent them out 2 by 2. And note how this ramps it up. When you go out and you are working with each other. And so note what gets missing when the legionary works alone. this element of the Presidium strengthening itself by means of Mary serving Christ as the members serve each other and work with each other. That's one of the fundamental reasons for the working together. And you notice it insists on those with whom you work. The ideal is that we don't regularly work alone. Obviously, there are situations which might require that from time to time. But again, the ideal is that we are working together, that this is shared work, that I am not the owner of it. The other implication of that is, you're not the owner of your partner. Those work assignments where our pairs begin to become permanent, this is not the equivalent of the sacrament of matrimony, and this is not till death do us part. Well, sometimes we think about it that way. I only work with so-and-so. Note how divisive that becomes. I only do this. Note how limiting that becomes. In a healthy Presidium, we may have regular teams, but it is important that those regular teams every now and then briefly split up to give the members a chance to fully get to know other members of the community and to experience some other work. It may be that ordinarily a certain group of people does this work. It's important from time to time that they do something different, so that every member of the Presidium has a taste of all of the major works of the Presidium. So that every member of the Presidium has the experience of working, at least briefly, with every other. Because if we can't work with each other, we'll never really trust each other. And what we don't want, we can have strong friendships in the Presidium, that's all fine, but we never want them to be so tight or exclusive. It limits our ability to function together. So again, the enemy of a lot of this is a certain possessive spirit, a certain spirit of ownership, where in a sense what we do is we limit grace, we limit the gospel, we limit the options that Our Lady has in working with us. But again, when we recognize that this all begins with a gift, and that gift is, I am making myself available to you, Mary, to serve you, and not myself, it becomes much more possible to readjust things. And, that's the key. If I am devoted to you, I want to be present to you. If I am devoted to you, I want your good. And if I am devoted to you truly, I will be at your service in some way. If I am devoted to Mary, I want to be present to Mary, the meeting. If I am devoted to Mary, I want to seek her good. I want her known. I want her honored. I want to make it a point to honor her. And if I am devoted to Mary, I will be at her service. So the prayer of the Legionary is not, Blessed Mother, do this for me. It's, Blessed Mother, what can I do for you? And again, note how that recasts everything. But what a remarkably beautiful point that is in all of its verbal complexity. How much is there that is so easily overlooked and so easily missed? And really what this does is it points out that we're sitting on top of something beautiful all along. It's not that it's not in your Presidium. It just might not be as obvious as you want it to be. And again, that's the point of a day like this, is to help surface that treasure buried underneath the surface. That being said, let's go back to the issue of new members. Okay? Because we talked about receiving members in the first two pieces. The next step is the issue of works. We need to be careful here. Okay? What we don't do is in week 2 invite a person to share our works, because we don't know them. And we have to understand, for example, you're doing a home visit. Why would we be bringing somebody that we don't really know into somebody else's home? Is that fair to the family we're visiting? You know, and so again, we have to understand, what we don't do are give probationary members early in that period their own works to do. We don't unite them with our works as the second member of a pair, but as the third, and their job is to watch and learn. See the difference? It's in fairness to the new member. We don't want to put them in a situation that they're not ready for, but it's in fairness to those who we work with. We need to get to know the person. We need to see them in certain situations, and they need to see what we do before they can do it. You know, and again, you sometimes experience, like when you work in a parish, a pastor will have a new member move into the parish. You know, and be, Father, I just moved into the neighborhood, you know, and, you know, I'm a lector and I'm a catechist, and how do I start? You know, and my answer to that has always been, you start by coming to Mass and praying with us for 6 months. Because we need to know you, and you, in fairness to you, need to know us. And let's figure out if this is where you really need to be. And let's get to know each other so you can see how we pray, how we work, how we do things. And make sure it's a good fit for you. If I just bring you in and put you on the team, that might not be fair to you in the first place. It's the same thing, you know, we've got 12 weeks. So again, when a new potential member comes, we've got 12 weeks. Use the 12 weeks. And so we can stage somebody into working. You know, as we see them, as we know them, but that also allows us every now and then to catch very early on. Oh, this person has a problem with his temper. You know, and all of a sudden, you know, that's something where we have to say, is this really going to work? Can we really do this with somebody who has a temper issue? You know, because again, I want to stress, the 12-week period is not you attend 12 weeks and automatically you're a member. This is another way we go wrong with bringing people in. Because what happens is, and you've seen it, Presidia every now and then have received members with emotional instability, or are simply uncooperative personalities who need to argue all the time, or are very domineering. And why? Because no one feels I can say no. Because after 12 weeks you take the promise. No. After 12 weeks there may be the possibility of taking the promise if the Presidium agrees. It is mutual.
How long do you give them if they're not ready in 12 weeks?
Okay, that's a good question. But let me answer it in two ways, okay? If it's the person doesn't feel ready in 2 weeks but looks like a solid potential member, the first question is, what's holding you back from making a decision, and how much time do you need? If it is a reasonable amount of time, 4 to 6 weeks, extend it. Okay? But I wouldn't extend it beyond that. You know, you have certain personalities, they will never make a decision. And that becomes exhausting. And you can only mentor somebody so far along. The Legion of Mary is based on commitment, and a real commitment. If after 12 weeks, I'm still unsure, either I'm afraid to make a commitment, which doesn't bode well for the future, or I've got 1 or 2 questions I just need to have answered. Okay? However, if it's somebody whose behavior is on the problematic side, I wouldn't extend the probationary period. I would invite them to separate themselves and maybe come back and try again, maybe next year or 6 months down the road. Okay? Because again, you have to think about respecting the quality of the Presidium. And again, sometimes a person is not a good fit for this Presidium, but might be wonderful in another one. That happens sometimes. In terms of his or her availability, in terms of what time of day works, in terms of the works they're naturally better at doing, or simply in terms of the personality doesn't work quite with us, but it will work with somebody else. There's nothing wrong with saying, for you, I think you're a better fit someplace else, and I would like to hook you up. Okay? But we want to respect, okay, the Legionary is not a private club, but that issue of whether someone will be a disruptive member or not, you have to look at that. Because otherwise, then, it can break up a healthy presidium. And so it's not that we only want people that we like, but we do have to have people we can work with constructively. And if there are signs of deeper issues, if nothing else, you talk to your pastor and you say, someone has been looking to join the Legion, we have some real concerns. Would you maybe join us for the meeting? And if need be, talk to the person afterwards? And any pastor worth the name, if you tell him we have somebody who might be a problem, oh, he's going to show up. Because he doesn't want that for his people either, and he doesn't want it for you. Okay? But again, I've seen areas where presidia that at one point were solid and functioning, by bringing in personalities that were unhealthy, very quickly became unstable. And what happens is, the healthy personalities leave. The unhealthy ones stay, and they attract more. And then what happens is the broader reputation of the Legion gets poisoned, especially among the clergy. And some of your priests who think negatively of the Legion do so because of that. Because their experience of the Legion was mediated by personalities that were less than healthy. So it's just important to be aware of it. And, I didn't want to dwell on this so long, but that issue of safety, your safety, the safety of those we work with is vitally important, and that's the point of number 4. Absolute respect for the confidential nature of many matters discussed at the meeting or learned in connection with legionary work. This is vitally important. We're not supposed to leave the Presidium meeting and go back home and talk about what we've learned at the kitchen table. We're not supposed to leave the Presidium meeting and sitting down over drinks with our friends, talk about what's going on in somebody's house. We're not supposed to leave the Presidium meeting and talk about what might be going on in the life of one of our other Presidium members. See, this is not just about protecting the people we visit, it's about protecting each other as well. There are times where what we discuss and what comes on the table at the Presidium meeting is deeply personal, often on the part of one of the members. And part of our respect for and care for one another is to respect that it stays there. Okay? The same thing. Consider what's involved in inviting somebody into your home. You open the door to your house to somebody, and that person walking in is going to see all the ways things aren't quite in order, is going to hear conversations in another room that you didn't plan to have happening while they were visiting. It's to see an awful lot of intimate detail into somebody's life. That's not for public broadcast. That's sacred. Imagine inviting somebody into your home. And you're opening the door, because when somebody opens the door to a Legion member, they're opening the door to the church. And so they're expecting that I'll be respected. My home will be respected. My family will be respected. I will risk bringing you in because I trust you. And so there are some things we're going to see. There are some things we're going to need to talk about. But it stays there. You know, there are certain serious issues where we might need to have a conversation with our pastor about them, okay? But not our next door neighbor. And so note this issue of an absolute respect for this. Because really what it is again, respect the sacred character of what is happening. Someone is being vulnerable. Someone is opening himself or herself up, and they might be taking a risk in doing that. And we want to honor that. You know, it may be that one of our Presidium members in saying, I couldn't do my work this week because my younger son, I just discovered, has a drug addiction. And I was at my wit's end trying to deal with that and even trying to find treatment for him and talk him into it. Well, you know, nobody else needs to know that. You know, nobody else needs to know that. And these are the kind of things that do come up from time to time. You know, this is real. And so note the issue here is we respect each other so much that we understand that there is something priceless here in what we do, and we want to make sure we treat it that way. But note that that is also one of the reasons for the 12-week period. You know, and it's not bad reminding a visitor, you know, at the end of the meeting, you've heard some things here, but I just want to stress what we talk about here stays here and doesn't go any further. And if a visitor shows any sign of not being able to do that, they're not good Legion material. You know, again, it's just a matter, it might be a good person, but not good Legion material. Because again, that puts people at risk. And I don't say this to say we have to have such a narrow standard, you have to be a fully formed saint to join the Legion, because I'd be the first guy who wouldn't make it. Rather, it's recognize that if we pay attention to that 12-week process, and we leverage this, which is a great model for how you gradually bring somebody in. The people that we do bring in are going to be well-formed. The people that we do bring in are going to be ready to work. And as we bring them in, the beautiful thing is the Presidium itself will be stronger. And it also allows us to catch potential mistakes or problems before they become so. And if it's not going to be a good fit, we are not doing the person who wants to join any favors by receiving them. That's the other side of it. The issue here is not an elitism. The issue here is making sure that we keep everything moving in the right direction. And, yeah, well, what a beautiful, beautiful model this is. And note how it's all predicated on, let's respect what we've been given. Let's respect who we are. And let's really value it. And I can't stress this enough, it's not a sin to be excited about it. It's not a sin to be glad about it. It's not a sin to enjoy it. And when there is a spirit of enjoyment at the meeting, it's attractive. It's infectious. It allows us to be stronger even if it's just us. But if there's a visitor, it's going to be the single biggest reason why they come back. And as Pope Francis so beautifully reminded us, a joyless Christian is no real Christian. We can say the same thing about members of the Legion. There should be a certain holy joyfulness about us. Not a shallow happiness, but there really should be an element of enjoying being with one another and enjoying what we do. And that's the essence of these points in the standing instruction. It's not just mechanically do them. It's do them the right way. And if you do them the right way, that is intrinsically life-giving. And I think I'm being cut off. It has been a delight to share these reflections with you.